Hello, welcome. This is our second video or webinar in a series that's really focusing on food safety and quality training and bringing in new employees. Before I get started, I want to remind everyone this is a project that's being undertaken by Kellerman Consulting and MANTEC, and I want to introduce Evan Bates, who was with us at our last presentation and has been an integral part of this, and let him introduce himself.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining today. It's a pleasure to be able to put this on with Kellerman Consulting, to utilize their expertise to bring some of you guys some tips and tricks and just knowledge in general. It's been the first one was fantastic. I look forward to this one as well and the rest of the series. So if you haven't signed up for those, please do sign up for the rest of the series, and hopefully we can continue these going. So the interest that you guys have is crucial to that. So just a quick background. I'm the sales and marketing advisor for MANTEC. So if you're located in the South Central Pennsylvania region, MANTEC is your resource center for manufacturing, whether that be food manufacturing or anything, anything that could even resemble manufacturing. We are part of a larger network. It's called the MEP Network, or Manufacturing Extension Partnership. It's actually a part of the larger NIST organization, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology, I believe. And we are a part of 60 plus centers around the United States that are resource centers for manufacturers. So that means that we help with everything from food safety and quality training through helping you lean out your facility or get you a new website. We are here to be your advisors. We're here to kind of help with anything you guys could possibly need to really help you guys with your businesses grow. So if you're in the South Central Pennsylvania region, please reach out to me directly. If you're not within the South Central Pennsylvania region, you could still reach out to me and I will direct you to your local MEP center, where there is a link in there in the chat that will take you to the MEP site to kind of showcase where your centers are and a little bit more about the program. There's tons of different information that we can offer in terms of grants and other different resources that we have. So please reach out to us. And again, huge thank you to the Kellerman Consulting team. And with that, Brian, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Very quickly to piggyback on that, for anybody, the MEP system, these are the good guys in the industry. They are a resource anywhere in the country. Almost each state has them. So if you have a chance, you should look up what an MEP is, where it is. Of course, if you're in central or southern Pennsylvania, you already know who to talk to. But we cannot speak highly enough of MEPs around the country. All right, so this presentation, we are going to move. In our previous presentation, we focused on the hiring process, resumes, and those kinds of things. In this presentation, we want to clear that out, and we want to focus on, all right, we have a new employee, we're elevating someone from in our organization, we have a role change, and how are we going to properly train employees? How are we going to present that information? And how are we going to make sure that those people in this role are going to be supported so that they can do their job effectively and ultimately be of tremendous value to your organization? Much of what we're going to talk about for the specific trainings are going to be food safety training courses. I am going to try to make sure to elevate quality assurance training as well. Some of those things are going to have nice overlaps, but we will try to make sure that no matter where you come from out of industry, if you're interested in thinking through trainings and what trainings are appropriate, then we're going to cover those things. So within that, we are going to talk about specific training requirements. So what trainings do we need to do? And I will tell you now, when we get into that, there are certification training. So those trainings that have a certificate at the end of it. And then there are the site-specific or organization-specific trainings that are provided. We're going to touch on both of those. They're not necessarily the same thing. I have a couple of case studies. One of them is specific to elevating someone within an organization through bringing up from operations into quality assurance. And then I do have another case study that's really more what we see as consultants. I promise you it is not a commercial for using consultants, but we happen to work a lot with people that are new in an organization to doing this stuff, and they get thrown into preparing for an audit of some kind or having to put regulatory documents in place. And what does that look like for us? What did we see? And then we'll talk about the sort of the functional trainings, that sort of confidence and how not to overwhelm people, how to get them to be the best QA person that they can be. So let's get into this specific training for, in this case, food safety, quality. I have been working with a client that's more worker safety. And I will say quickly as a plug, we talk about food safety so much because in food safety, you don't talk about worker safety. That's kind of a separate bucket, even though everything is important. Keeping our workers safe is important. And quality assurance has a role there. When we talk about food safety, we care about the safety of food and of the people eating that food. And it's so specific to this industry. But when we talk about quality assurance, it's applicable in a more general sense. So when you, and again, some of the slides here reference new employees. I kind of wrote them that way. But whether someone's a new employee or been elevated or been promoted, QA manager quits and you take a QA tech and bring them up. What, in all of those cases, what do we need here? What is it that at its core that people need to know as part of this process of becoming a good QA person? So within an organization, as I just mentioned, you have certification schemes, right? So when we talk about certified programs, when I see people's resumes and they say, I'm certified in HACCP, well, there is no real certification in HACCP. There's no certification in ISO 9001 auditing. Those things are not certified like you would be if you pass the bar as a lawyer or you're a doctor or a social worker with a license. A certification training, for those of you who do not know, there have to be accredited organizations. And when it comes to something like food safety, there are certain organizations that pay for and subscribe to larger nonprofit organizations or government organizations to demonstrate the authority to present a certificate at the end of it that can be presented to an authority figure to say, hey, I have taken a class that is appropriate and legal for this. So just as a quick example, this webinar is not an accredited webinar. I am not accrediting you folks that are listening to it to go out there in the world and say, well, I listened to Brian Kellerman talk for an hour, and so I'm ready for this. Now, my hope is that the information I provide to you helps, but we don't accredit this program, and we didn't go through the hoops for that. Someday, maybe, I don't know, but it's not been a priority for my company to do that. In the meantime, though, if you take a certification course, you get a certificate at the end that you can present. And of course, if someone takes a course with a certificate, how long that certificate is good for is a big question mark. And it comes up regularly. Like if I take for the food industry, a HACCP course, or if I take an ISO 9001 audit training course, is that good for like a year? Do I have to take another one? They really don't have expiration dates. But if I took, and I will candidly tell you, I took my PCQI, which again is a type of food safety training course for FDA facilities. I got mine done in 2016. That was right when it happened. Maybe 2015 before it was official. I took one of the first courses, but I haven't taken one since. Now, the good news is the laws are the rules are the same approximately as they were then. And I have stayed very up to date on the rules. So my certificate still holds. But for someone who maybe took one 10 years ago, it probably is behoove of us to maybe redo them. And I say this, mine's now 9 years ago. So I might have to take another one of these courses soon just to make sure I'm fully up to speed on what the training courses are talking about. In industry, I've listed a few of them. In the food industry, we have HACCP, which is the internationally, for those of you outside of America, HACCP is still the order of things in food safety. And in America, seafood, meat, and poultry and juice still operate under HACCP. And so if you take a training course, if you are a seafood facility, or if you are a facility that makes juice, or a meat or poultry facility underseen by FSIS or the State Department of Ag, there is going to be a expectation that a person running the program is going to have a certified training course. So they're going to have a certificate that they took training to run the program or to write documents. If you're an FDA facility And I just mentioned that I took my course to be a PCQI, that is a preventive controls qualified individual, which in America we have what is called FSMA, or 21 CFR 117. That is preventive controls, and someone who takes a training course for FSMA gets designated as a PCQI, the preventive controls qualified individual, with a certificate. And that would be something that a facility that is overseen by FDA, under FDA jurisdiction, should have a certified person, and really must have a certified person for that. If you do low acid canning, then a person needs to probably undergo better process school course, and the universities usually are the ones that put that on. There's also acidified or acid food courses separate of better processing school, and those are courses that you may want to consider having if it's a new employee or someone taking over a role. Those courses are, of course, very valuable. I didn't put the cost on there, but you should budget. I mean, if you're thinking of doing that, these courses are not free. Some of them are pricey. They're usually between $200, maybe about $800 to $900 for the more expensive ones. For internal auditing, and this is one I have to tell you, you can take internal auditing courses around many, many different topics. For internal auditing, I do recommend the ISO 9001 internal audit training is one that is of particular value. The only problem is they go through ISO 9001, which is quality management system training. Certainly, if you're not a food facility and you're someone watching this, then ISO 9001 training, absolutely, quality management is the right target. You can get an internal audit training against other specific ISO schedules or ISO schemes. For food, the food specific internal audit training can be gotten. So that's like an SQF internal audit training course, or BRCGS. Those are offered if you get an ISO 9001, which is non-food specific. If you get a training course in that is accepted across all industries. It is somewhat of the top internal audit training course, and we do recommend that. All of our people, when we hire consultants, we ask them to take the ISO 9001 training course. So that's a great potential course if internal auditing is part of your program. Food defense, someone really should take a food defense training. And again, food defense is a regulatory requirement. 21 CFR 121 is the food defense requirements. And so someone getting a training course on that is a very good idea. And then for the food factories, if environmental monitoring is something that you do in the facility, you could take pay for someone to go to a training course there. Food fraud prevention is another one that it's a good thing to have. They are not, the food defense and the internal audit training are required for certification schemes, for certain programs that say you have to have a person who knows how to do this if you're going to get certified for SQF or BRC. Certainly for ISO 9001, you need to have a person in the facility that's gone through training for that. And that ISO 9001 training is pricey. That's over $1,000. Food defense, environmental monitoring, food fraud, that would probably be in the $200 to $400 range or so. If it's accredited, you can have a certificate at the end of it. But even if you just take a course, if it's not accredited and you want credit for it, that would be great. And as I say, for this video, if you tell somebody, an authority, I watched a video and this guy, Brian Kellerman, doesn't seem like an idiot. So maybe that's of value. It's something, and this thing's being recorded, so a person could check. If you take a course, they would want to see either a certificate or the training materials that went with it. Okay, so separate of those basic training courses, again, those should be the first things you look at. And I guess I had meant to say or suggest, for your facility, it's probably a really good idea to start with trying to figure out if you need somebody to have these certificates, right? So checking the rules, thinking about what you folks make. If you're senior management, if you're a bakery, you might want to think through, like, what does a bakery need to have? Do I have my people? Do they have the right certifications, the certificates of training courses? You should ask. And not only that, if you're a senior management and you have a good QA person, you should ask them to tell you what trainings are there. A good QA person should be able to give you a report of, I did some research and this is what I found trainings that we really need. You don't need to go wild on that, but that is a great place to start. And those certified trainings we just spoke about would be a thing that someone could take and you could pay for and get credit for doing those things. If you are subscribed to a certification scheme, so if your facility is pursuing SQF, or if you're doing an AIB, GMP audit, or if you're trying to be certified to a seafood HACCP certification, it is highly recommended that if you have a new employee that they take a training course in that. If you are trying to elevate someone in the facility into that, they should be training or taking some kind of training course. But I want to caution, the requirement is not that an SQF person takes an SQF course. If you go look at the rules for SQF or BRCGS, FSSC 22000, even these very high level programs, same for ISO 9001, you don't have to have someone take a training course in these programs. That is not the requirement. For food programs, the HACCP training, that PCQI training, the internal audit training, those are the requirements. And with ISO 9001, the only one that's required is the internal audit training, because you have to do an internal audit and the person has to be trained to do an internal audit. They have to understand what that is. So be aware of that. You don't have to have someone trained in those programs. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. But with that said, if you think that's a good idea, or if your person suggests it, if a new hire or an elevated employee wants to, it's a great idea. Now, one special case here is if you have a pre-existing program and someone is going to administer that program, they may not have a lot of writing responsibilities. They may need to complete forms, do assessments, write emails, fine. But if you have a new program, if part of your plan as a facility is to expand what you do and you want to add a new training program and writing is going to be in it, then these training courses are going to be really important for somebody that you're going to say, hey, I need you to write policies and procedures. Policies and procedures, SOPs, food safety plans, allergen control plans, quality management plans, sampling and testing programs for ISO 9001 programs. These are complex, and these training courses are really, really helpful. If you take someone, elevate them from internal operations and just say, hey, I need you to write a sampling and testing program, that can be very, very challenging for someone who doesn't know exactly what that is. And, you know, unfortunately, folks who want to be elevated may not be very clear about that when you elevate them, but sending them to a training course can be a kind gesture and can be a source of helping them gain that confidence to put pen to paper or type up, as it were, a new policy, a new procedure, properly document what is actually going on. Here, I just wanted to give a frame of reference for those people who may have writing responsibilities. If you need someone to write you a new program, if you're going to hire somebody and you say, well, gosh, I want to get FSIS registration, I want pre-approval or to get a grant of inspection for FSIS, or I want to have an FDA ready program for next year when FDA is maybe going to show up, you're looking at a couple dozen documents. 20 to 30 documents for FSIS is the standard for all of what FSIS is looking for. If you are listening to me and you're saying, wait a minute, I need 20 or 30 documents and I don't know what those are, start doing some research. That's unfortunately, you're gonna have to call a consultant or somebody who can point you in the right direction, but you need a bunch of those documents that FSIS would be looking for. FDA is a little bit murkier because they don't tell you exactly what documents, but in our programs, candidly, we write 45 to 50 documents at a minimum to cover all of the areas of what an inspector would be looking for. And I can tell you that in our case, we've been doing this long enough where without selling our services, what I do want to say is that we get the FDA in there regularly into our clients' facilities. FSIS has to pre-approve every program. So we know through experience approximately what's being looked for. And so these numbers are tried and true as far as roughly the number of documents to cover all of the areas of operation. As you jump up into certification schemes, you can plan on just about double or triple that. For GMP and GDPs, you don't really necessarily have senior management review processes. You don't have culture of safety and quality may not be a requirement. Internal auditing, maybe not. So you have 60 to 70 documents will probably get you there. For GFSI, 125, 150 at least. And that's to cover your SOPs, your supplier approval, all of those responsibilities, the internal audits, every prerequisite program, all of those things, that's what you're looking for. So if you're going to bring someone in to write a program like this, the trainings that you would offer them or pay for them, those are going to help a lot because there's going to be a lot of that writing. We're going to talk about how not to overwhelm employees later in this presentation. And will tell you ahead of time that hiring someone off the street to write you one of these programs is asking for trouble. It can be done. It has happened before in the past. It's not can never happen, but it is a very tall order. And when you're thinking about whether elevating somebody or hiring a new employee, bringing them in, if your expectation is we want to attract a higher revenue clients or a major retailer and we want a fancy food safety program or a quality program, someone who's never done it, if you think that it's just going to magically show up correctly, that is taking a tremendous risk, one that probably is going to result in at a minimum a lot of stress. Beyond these, whether they're writing programs, beyond what certification training courses they may want to take, some things to consider that are going to be site specific. So we did cover what are the types of out there training courses can you take for employees, whether a new one or an operational employee. We talked about it in our previous series. I want to reiterate here, a good QA person is going to do walkthroughs. If they have a clipboard in hand, they're going to do a really good job of going around and checking the facility. And so they should have some training on that. And there may not be a training course external to your organization. Somebody should be showing a new employee, walk them around the facility and show them what goes on everywhere. And if you have a good hire, they should be taking notes because they should be walking around and checking that, hopefully on a daily basis. There's really no reason why you can't have an employee put on a jacket or put on a hairnet, whatever the requirements are, and get out there and walk around and write down what they see, because that's the most important thing that you are going to get in a quality assurance person. Now, beyond that, how nonconformances are written or how record reviews are performed, whether they're done, whether they should be done, those things are probably going to be more site specific, and certainly the training courses will cover that. But you really need to think through what's already in place, and do I have somebody in senior management? Do I have a long-time serving employee that can explain to people how things go, even if they don't consider themselves a good trainer or are comfortable doing that? The people who have been there the longest, obviously, as I think everyone listening probably knows, is somebody that's going to be able to at least talk through how things really go in a facility. And that source of information, when it comes to the site-specific information, might be where you need to go first. If you already have a written program, obviously that's the dream, is I have SOPs and they're written and they're accurate and they're easy to understand. I have pictures with arrows, how to turn things on or where to look for things. That is the best stuff. But if you don't already have a program like that, then and you want that built, you at least need to start with who's got it. So I got a hand clapping from Lydia. I hope I said something that deserves some hand clapping, but I appreciate that if so. Okay, the running of required meetings, and this is what a QA person has to do, right, on a regular basis. In a food factory, you need to have regularly occurring HACCP, or if you're in FDA facility preventive controls meetings, that's a team that goes into the food safety plans. And those people have to meet on a regular basis. Now, what regular might be annual. If you are really wanting to do the minimum, then you would meet at least once a year to review your food safety plan. If you want to do best practice, it might be every month or sometimes even every couple of weeks, every other week sometimes, if you really want to do gold standard work. And so a person who has those responsibilities needs to be trained on the food safety plan, the issues, and how to run those meetings. Otherwise, they are not going to go well. Recall is something for, again, food factories have to have a recall plan. Minimum once a year, you need to come together, do a mock recall. Sometimes, and certainly if you've ever had a recall, you need to meet and debrief about those things. Best practice, probably, now granted, the HACCP team, the preventive controls team, and the recall team are frequently the same people. So if you're meeting regularly for HACCP team and you want to throw in a recall discussion in there, you'll meet your obligation. But if you have a recall team and it has a salesperson or a senior manager who otherwise wants nothing to do with your food safety team, then you may want to consider doing it a few times. But again, training on recall, training on the principles of it, that person running those meetings better know what they're doing and better have some degree of familiarity. Minimum expertise would be better on how those things are supposed to go. Defense and fraud, same basic concepts, right? What is food fraud? If a person running your program or doing QA, running a QA program, they need to know what food fraud is, how your facility specifically addresses that. So like the walkthrough, like writing up a non-conformance report, you folks have food fraud prevention in your facility. If you have locks on your door, if you get COAs, if you check a truck, there's some amount of fraud prevention going on. Whether it's codified into a full plan yet or not remains to be seen. It goes facility by facility, but a person needs to know what your facility does. So again, that person who's been here forever can tell you. If you already have a written program, that person can read it. And if they want them to take a training course, they can learn the concepts. Those things with a sort of a lattice work of training, now you can get someone who really can run a meeting about it, can talk to an outsider, can talk to customers about it. Those are the people that are going to help drive your company forward. And you can have a quality assurance program that you're confident is something that's going to get you new business. And that once you get that business, keep it. So with that said, one of the ways we advertise this webinar, and one of the things I really want to make sure we talk about, it's really important to me. When folks want to get QA, and depending on senior management at any company, we tend to see senior management silo in their minds. Operations, quality assurance is quality assurance, maintenance is maintenance. And because quality assurance is a tough job, we talked about this the last webinar, it does require a lot of technical expertise. It is complicated. And so senior management tends to say like, well, operations, those guys just do operations. They're not QA people. But I want to stress that your operations folks in your facility, they are already the experts on how you run. If they've made it, if they've been around for more than a few months, if they've demonstrated, any worker who's demonstrated to you that they are loyal, paying attention, and responsible, those people very quickly learn how your facility operates. And when we talk about things like doing walkthroughs or doing non-conformance reports, the operators already know how things really are supposed to go. They already are experts on all of the mistakes that are going on in your facility, all the things that should be done differently but aren't. Your operators already know. The QA person that you hire, somebody with a fancy degree who has never been in your facility, is going to have to learn, and they're going to have the operators probably trying to hide from them anyways. So when you think about your pool of production associates, the ones you like the best, yeah, I know it's hard to think like, I'm taking off my best person off the line, then what? Well, you take that person off the line and you move them into QA. If they have the right personality and skill set for it, can push your business forward. And it's something that I can tell you, when I was a QA manager, that was what I advocated for. I like to see that in businesses. And I want to talk to you about this case study in which that was one case in which we're aware of that happening. And it was a warehouse worker with a high school education and promoted up from the warehouse to the QA lab. And in this case, what I can speak to about this without revealing personal information was a resistance between some folks in senior management. Others were for it, some were against it. The high school education was a real drawback, which I can tell you, I mean, I consider myself an egalitarian. I don't really think that the degree you have says anything about you. I think there's a lot of dumb people who have very fancy degrees and real smart people who have none, and everything in between. Obviously, going to your level of education does potentially make you more capable of understanding complex issues, I suppose. But in this case, this worker, as I experienced interacting with them through what relationship I had with that company, I found that person to be a pretty good technician, and I was asked to evaluate that. But senior management, they made it candid. They doubted or didn't think of that person as someone who could rise up in that organization. If you are going to promote from within, and you need to check your own biases right at the beginning, because if your position is someone needs to have a college degree or an advanced degree to raise up farther than being a QA tech, or they can never be upper level management, maybe don't elevate. And I will tell you candidly that I don't think that's a good attitude. But if it is, there's no arguing with that. But it needs to be thought through before you consider elevating, because it will ultimately affect how you think of that person, no matter what. If that person is going to, in this case study, the person was given QA tasks, but not management. And that's important, right? So there were QA tasks at the organization that needed to be done. Those tasks included document review, pre-shipment reviews, preoperative inspections. The morning, in this case for that organization, I believe it was earlier in the morning. So that person was coming in early to do those checks, COA intakes, administering a kosher program. Organic may have been involved as well, but I'm sure kosher was. So that person was providing valuable QA roles. They were doing tasks that had to be done for the QA department. And that QA tech worked with the person we're aware of for about 18 months. And so that person did have some longevity at that company. As I mentioned, ownership basically was a detriment to that process. They were judgmental of that person from the jump. Hey, we're just raising somebody up because we needed to find somebody. Certainly with the lower degree without a college education, I think there was an opportunity to potentially pay less. And so that might have been attractive. I do wonder in this case study, what could have happened with that person if they had been supported more vigorously by senior management from the start. But when you bring somebody from operations, these are the things that come up. What is their education level? What is their sophistication level with complex concepts? I also want to bring up, and this is something that I have seen in my own career. I was a high school teacher before I got into quality assurance. So I've seen this at a young person level, and I see it at the professional level, usage of computers and phones. And I'm not, kind of curmudgeon who says everyone abuses technology. I don't know about phone addiction or anything like that. But one thing I will tell you is if you bring someone from operations, a good question to ask them is, have you ever used a computer for your job? And that is very different than, do you know how to use a phone? Because I can tell you that folks who get jobs who have never used a computer in their job, the distractions that computers offer can be a huge detriment for how someone takes on a new role. And that is something that from a new training standpoint, you may want to consider, because somebody who's never had YouTube at work, it's a rabbit hole to go down. Someone who's even education sites, if I go on Wikipedia and I need to find information that may be valuable information for my job, valuable technical information. But if I've never had time management issues around those or never developed those muscles, it's pretty shocking how people will use computers at work and how they will sort of try to navigate the need for being productive with the distractions that come with computers. I would say in these times, the phones are every bit. If someone's going to have a problem with it, you'll see it with their phone as much as with their computer. But somebody who's not really dealt with this as part of their day job, that's something to think about, and maybe forming a plan for monitoring that and helping provide some support and feedback for someone, how they use computers, how they manage their time. Those things are obviously not QA specific, and even less so food factory specific, but they very much are a integral part when you're thinking about a QA tech or a food safety person that is doing work that requires a lot of concentration, that's very technically specific. For this case study, even just doing document review, for those of you who have any experience doing document review, sitting there looking at COAs and checking off values of moisture content in incoming product is not the most exciting work. And it requires you really, like, you can kind of turn your brain off a little bit, but not too much, because you can't let things slide or slip through the cracks. So at the end, I do want to say that the employee in the case study I've presented here, as I mentioned, they knew the system. They came from the warehouse. And that person, as I understood it, was quite good in the walkthrough part of the job, in interfacing with employees. They already knew the lingo in the back, and they were trusted by other workers. It was a huge benefit by elevating them, because it gave a morale boost to all of the workers. Now, obviously, there's a limited number of QA jobs, but if you take someone from the back and you elevate them, there might be other opportunities for other workers. And if you want to keep people, giving them chances to move up and move out of the back into the front of the house, even if it's QA, that's a way to keep motivated people sticking around. That person was able to take on QA roles, and they were able to talk to customers, regulators, and auditors, which again is a key function for the internal audit function. As I mentioned, that person had never used a computer in this case. And as I say, I've seen that elsewhere. So the computer habits were not great. And, there were concerns. That person definitely was not taking on responsibilities, was not being heavy in initiatives because of really, I think, self-concept, fear and anxiety about taking on some of the complex quality assurance projects, doing sampling and testing, doing math evaluation. So there were limits, but for the 18 months that I'm aware that person worked, I would say that the employee that had them was probably in the better, whether or not senior management saw it that way, or whether they got over the education issues that they had. So that is a case study in just what it looks like to elevate, what in abstract. And here I want to talk about what we do. Again, not to sell this. Not everyone needs consultants, and that everyone is better off when they don't need a consultant, right? That's, if you can do it yourself, that's for the best. When we are involved in projects, oftentimes a major opportunity comes up with a new scheme and no one has done it. And as I mentioned previously, if you're going to ask someone to write a program from scratch, that is a tough thing. And we'll talk about that again in a later slide even. But in the meantime, what we have seen is that if you take someone from the front of the house, if you take an accountant or a business administrator, and they drew the short straw and get stuck with a program because the other workers that you can't lose are like, no way, I won't touch this, I'll walk. Then you create a situation in which somebody who does not have these familiarities, I should say, with the concepts, is now being thrust into a situation where they're going to have to construct and build out a program and make sure it works. And if they've never done it, that can be quite stressful. We have had, and this is we chose one case, but we have this happen regularly. A customer asked for GFSI certification, and they gave them to the end of the year. And this was something in the summer. We got a phone call. We got to get this done by December. And they did not have quality management already in place. And that's pretty common for the folks who self-select for us. And they identified an office manager. And that office manager had computer skills. They were very good in talking to people. They had been around for a little while, and they knew the company in general and had plenty of experience with how ingredients were purchased and how storage was done up to, they weren't spending a lot of time in the back, but they knew some of it. And we immediately identified that person was going to need to take special trainings, and then we were going to work them through all the concepts of what that program was. We obviously visited the facility and helped. We presented the documents for that program, and then with that person went through line by line and updated that program to be customized to them. And we were able to get the specifics dialed in. So we do, in this case, we did take a person who had not had a background in it. We do see that regularly, and it is something that can be done. It's not something we recommend. It's quite stressful for someone who doesn't have a background in doing this. But as many of you know, if you're in Southern or Western Pennsylvania, if you're in any rural areas other than that, you know that finding people is very hard. And the person who runs your program is probably already in your building. If you can ratchet them up, if you can ladder them up to get this done, it can be a huge benefit to the business, and it can really push things forward. In this case, that office manager, they complied. They were a good student of ours. They were a good client of ours, and they listened and they studiously took those training courses. In this case, that person was running a facility that was relatively simple in their operations. It was not scientifically rigorous, and it was pretty simple with the processing that was being done. So it was not overly complicated to go out in the back and see it. And it was easy, somewhat easy to understand. In the weekly meetings that we had, that person was able to really take control over operations. And I will say that in this case, there are two separate parts of the business that were like a mile apart. So they had like one building where it was a mile away, and was a precursor to their operation. And then they took product from that, they ship it over to another facility, and then they do the finishing off, and then it ships. And that person was located in the finishing part of the building, and nervous as all get out. But man, that person is one of the projects I'm personally very, very proud of. And that the company, the fact that they were able to take this one person who has a great personality and was very ready to take on these responsibilities, very careful, again, a very nervous person, but ultimately very good-hearted. And, that company is positioned to, really expand and really become I would assume a national business for what they've done. And finding that person inside of their operation was crucial to that. Passing a GFSI audit with that person, the QA people we work with, even if they've started off outside of it, if they're prepared for an audit and they really put in the work, passing that GFSI audit is not difficult. So we're going to spend, for the last 10, 15 minutes that we have, I want to talk about how do we do this so we don't overwhelm people, and how do we build up that confidence. And I have a couple of things to think about before we open the floor for questions. If you are going to bring in a new hire, and most of the new hires, even if they have a background in quality, may not have the applicable quality for your facility, whether it's a food facility or an industrial facility running a quality program. If you have a new hire, they're going to need guidance. And I see this all the time. People get hired as QA techs or QA managers, and it's like, all right, good, you're a QA manager, I'm done here. Whether it's senior management or operations, they don't want, like I say, those parts of the facility are often siloed. So the plant manager or the operations manager tends to say, hey, QA manager, you go do your thing. I don't know anything about it. Tell me if you find something in the back and I'll fix it. And new hires need that guidance. If you're going to hire somebody to be, I don't care if it's a director of quality or a QA manager, they need guidance. And anybody, and I'm telling you right now, you hire somebody for a QA role and they tell you that they don't need help, and they bristle and they roll their eyes, they're a bad hire. And you know it right away. That a person coming into these roles should be open-minded, to be learning very intently, and should be paying close attention to what the new thing that they're learning is in this facility. And if they come in with an ego on this, you can see that red flag coming a mile away. And I will just tell you right now, simple rule here. If you are bringing in a brand new person off the street, I don't care what their resume says, I don't care what their education level, if you're hiring them and you don't have a QA program, you should take a long look in the mirror and reevaluate what you're doing, because you should be avoiding that like your life depends on it, because bringing in a new person to write a new program is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And I say this as a consultant that helps mediate that. Well, for those people who are just hoping that they're going to pull a 1 in a million and grab someone off the street and then force them into or trick them into building a new program, this stuff is so stressful, and it is so difficult to know what you do know and what you don't know, and trying to navigate these things. It is a extremely difficult thing to accomplish. With that, software, which is of course a huge buzzword, and it is a incredibly sort of always on the front of everyone's mind concept. Either you have the software with a new hire, either there is some kind of pre-existing technological structure, or do not bother with a new hire bringing in software. Do not hire someone and say, I'm going to get you software. As a general rule, again, 1 in a million, maybe that can work. And maybe some of you are going to text me or email me after this and tell me, oh, I do that all the time and it works great. Fine. Maybe you know something I don't. But in my experience, new technology and new software is a absolute, it's an overwhelming barrier for someone who is not already extremely familiar with it, and trying to keep track of QA concepts. Again, whether it's industrial or food, trying to keep track of those concepts and trying to figure out software at the same time, you're asking for a lot of trouble. So within that, we want to, so if we're talking about what we don't want to do, those are the things like you either have a system, you bring a person in to learn that system, or bring in a new person, let them figure out your company, and then try to add systems after they've demonstrated competence. But regardless, you need to, if you're bringing in a new person, there needs to be a set schedule of things that you're going to show them. Again, a walkthrough, series of walkthroughs. And again, that person better be excited to do those walkthroughs, or else they're demonstrating some troubling behavior. So going through scheduled activities for the first few weeks, as I mentioned in the previous webinar we did, spending some time on the floor actually doing what workers do would be the ideal. So whether it's for a day or a couple days, taking a shift, working side by side with the operators, you cannot build more confidence for your QA people than showing operators, hey, I'm not above this. I'm willing to slap labels on pallets. I'm willing to lift heavy bags the same as you. First, it's a great thing to do. Plus, if they don't do that great of a job, that's all right. Letting the operators know that they've got, especially someone who's been there for a while, that they can sling stuff around the back better than their QA people, that's not a bad thing for them to see. And the egos should be left at the door anyways. The QA people are there to review documents and support them. So if they're not as good at the actions, so be it. That's not a bad thing. If you're doing an audit-ready program, so if it's a certification scheme, go ahead and my recommendation is pay that extra money. Any certifying body will do a practice audit. You have to specify. Don't say I'm doing a pre-approval audit where they're evaluating your program. If you have a program that's ready to go and you have a new person to run it, let them spend a few grand, let them go through a practice audit, and that way it'll help them think through what documents are being asked for and what they need to present. Those practice audits are very helpful. Now, we get people call us up and they want an internal audit. We consider an internal audit and a practice audit to be somewhat interchangeable in concepts, because reviewing documents and showing someone what documents are going to be reviewed the overlap is almost 1-to-1. But something like that is a very, very valuable tool for a new employee. So presenting information, especially for new hires or elevated employees, if you have a review function for senior management, or if you're a director of quality assurance and you're thinking through like how can I help someone understand if they have to write documents, or if they have to create new training materials, how can I support them, and how can I tell them if it's right or wrong? I highly recommend, what I try to do when I have people I'm working with is take the track changes on a Word document, and you turn on track changes. And that way you can make changes. It'll do a little line through of the sentence. It shows you where the change was made. So doing a few documents that way, it takes a little extra time and the person has to approve all those changes. Extremely valuable. It helps the person that you're bringing in to learn the program understand your thought process. And they really do get a sense, even though it shouldn't make that much of a difference, that track changes function really shows people the window into your thinking. And that training is as important as what is right and wrong. To go with that, I see regularly people in these positions and they get research projects. Go look up these regulations. Go see if you can figure out. They just did this Prop 14 pork thing and egg thing. Go research that and see what you can figure out. For a new hire, I would say those are not great projects. They may be necessary. However, research projects are a perfect opportunity for people to spend many hours accomplishing nothing. You don't know really. People, especially new hires, will accept those responsibilities without being honest about it. And it can really turn off people to a job quickly. So if you want somebody to learn that information, again, a training course that you pay for or doing it with them is going to be way more valuable than saying, go sit at a cubicle and figure this out. It's just, those are not valuable training experiences. And again, I want to say those QA hires, they need guidance. They need somebody walking them around. They need to be shown what is correct and is not specific to an operation. They need to be introduced to the people in the facility by name, and they need to get an understanding of how things, both on an emotional level and a technical level, actually work in operation. And so there needs to be planned guidance through the facility, I would say, for at least a couple weeks. And lastly, as I put in here, don't leave your QA people unsupervised. That at least new hires, that's not, or an elevated person. As I mentioned in previous webinar, I will repeat here, QA does have authority at some level in the back, right? They're watching other people there doing document reviews, and leaving someone completely unsupervised, you can do real damage in the back real quick with someone with inappropriate attitude or who doesn't know how to handle power dynamics around quality assurance work. And open-ended projects with no deadlines. And these are just ways to make sure that you don't get stuck with somebody and waste 3 or 4 months of their startup time before you realize that they're not buying into your system or not able to self-direct in a way that's efficient and effective. Whew, that was a lot. So we are closing in on the last 8 minutes or so of the presentation. I wanted to open up the floor. Evan is back. I wanted to know if anyone had any questions. So we'll give at least an awkward minute here to see if anyone has questions and you want to ask them. Please feel free to throw them into the chat bar here and we can answer some of those for you. And after that awkward minute, we're going to be done if no one asks questions. So now's your time.
While we wait, I'll just say a quick thanks again to the Kellerman team and to Brian for putting this on. Lots of great information. I saw some familiar names in the box of people watching, so definitely appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope the other folks got something out of it. I don't think we got straight to a minute, but I don't see any immediate questions. What I will say as we round out is that if you have any, you have our contact information here below for both Kellerman Consulting and for MANTEC. So if you realize after this that you have some questions you want to cover with us, either organization, please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to answer any of these questions. Thank you, folks. Thank you for listening. We'll do a couple more of these, I think, in this series at least. And we're always trying to present something that's of value to you. So have a great rest of your week, and hope to hear from some of you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.